My name is Daragh Nagle, and this is my wife, Kate O'Neill, and we are the proud owners of the boat behind us, Chantey V. And this is the boat that took us on a Pan-American cruise all the way from Victoria to St. John's, Newfoundland, and back again. And we're hoping to show you around. So come on aboard.
So here we are in our little floating home on the water, Chantey V, and first mate Bridie here, our new puppy, who came along with us. So a little bit of history. Daragh and I met in 2006, and almost right away he announced that he wanted to do a big offshore trip and go on a cruise somewhere, a big adventure. And I was like a reluctant sailor at that point. So we did a shakedown cruise around Vancouver Island, which turned out to be a great success for a couple of months. And then we decided to take off for Mexico. And we left the following August into 11 and took off for San Francisco and Mexico and places beyond. And that was the beginning of a 5-year cruise went through Mexico, where we got married, which we hadn't really planned on, but we just decided to go for it. And through the Panama Canal and down to Colombia. Then we turned around and began our second year, going all the way up the East Coast through Central America once again, Cuba, the Bahamas, the East Coast of the United States, and all the way up to Newfoundland. At which point I got off and went back to work, and Daragh carried on the return trip with assorted family members, friends, and crew members.
One thing about visiting Newfoundland and the Maritimes is the ideal time is to go during July and August. The bad news is that when you're finished and you want to leave, you're in the height of the hurricane season in the North Atlantic. However, with good forecasting, we felt we could make the passage safely to Bermuda. And when we left it there in the middle of September, it seemed like an underwhelming sort of a hurricane season. However, as soon as we were gone, Hurricane Gonzalez came along at a Category 2 as it passed over Bermuda and did a direct hit on the boat. It survived very nicely. As a matter of fact, the little anchorage we were in behind White Island, our boat was the only one still on a mooring. Everything else had either been washed ashore or sank at its mooring. Anyways, we came back in November with Dave Turin and my good friend John Duggan, and we checked the boat over, and there was surprisingly little damage. It had everything inside spilled onto the companionway floor and so on, but there was no major damage except for some cables had come disengaged from the quadrant at the back. Once they were reattached, everything was fine. So we set out for St. Martin. That's about a 1-week trip, and we arrived in St. Martin quite safely, having made a good passage, where I was joined again by Kate and her sister Teresa, and they came aboard for the Christmas period and sailed with us down through St. Bart's and on to Antigua, and we had a great Christmas and a voyage down there. I carried on from Antigua with my son Brian and his fiancée at the time, Donna, and sailed with us down through the Eastern Caribbean islands, including a trip all the way from St. Lucia out to Barbados. And that's a difficult passage, you know. It's some say it's easier to sail to Europe than it is to get to Barbados, because it's upwind and up current. Anyways, carried on from there and sailed down to Grenada, and had a new crew member join us, Ole Anderson, and we sailed from there across to Los Roques in Venezuela, and then on to the ABC Islands. We carried on from there, from the ABCs back to Panama, went through the canal again, and worked our way up the coast back to El Salvador. And once again, left the boat there, waiting for the hurricane season to settle down, and left the boat there. The following December, Kate and I returned to the boat, and after some repairs and stuff that had gone sideways while we'd left it, we sailed it up the coast again, this time with an Irish friend, Turlough Cott, who came aboard, and we made our way northwards up to the Sea of Cortez and Topolobampo, Copper Canyon, Puerto Escondido, and finally stopping off at Cabo San Lucas. And at that point, Kate once again decided she'd go to weather by WestJet better than on the boat, and my friend John Duggan and Al Kitchen came aboard for the trip, a 3-week voyage from Cabo to Hawaii. And that all went quite well, with a small exception of a baby stay failing about a week into the trip. Now that was jury-rigged with an old halyard that I had on board, and I was able to get a line around a strop on the middle of the mast back to a winch and keep the mast in tension. So after we arrived in Hawaii, the boys flew off, and Kate arrived with a new baby stay in her suitcase, along with my daughter Kim. And we then proceeded to cruise the Hawaiian Islands, and in fact over the next 2 months we visited all 6. During that time we had other friends, notably Pat Card and Michelle Barber joined us for a few weeks, and also Sister Teresa and her husband and son Sean also came to us while we were in Maui. And the Hawaiian Islands were a very wonderful place to cruise. So for the trip home then, all the guests disappeared, and Paul Jenkins and Jerry Morrison from the Yacht Club and Turkey Head Association flew out for the trip home. That was another 3 weeks, and we had a very good voyage around the Pacific North High, and made the trip in 21 days. So that ended what was a 5-year Pan-American trip. We covered almost 25,000 nautical miles over the 5 years, and the boat Chantey has proven to be a seaworthy, comfortable and safe vessel for the voyage.
So all in all, the trip was a great success, and we had many wonderful adventures and some scary moments along the way as well, as you might imagine. Of course, the wedding was the high point. It better be. And we invited the family down and had a great party in Mexico. But then when we crossed to the other side, we did get into some heavy weather, especially when we started doing the return trip from Colombia back up to Central America and trying to get into Boca de Toros in Guatemala from the islands, the Panamanian Islands. I guess it's always like a series of events that leads to bad decisions and bad outcomes. And I guess we were in an anchorage. It was like sweltering hot. We'd been stuck there for a week, and we wanted to get out of there and get on with our trip. And Daragh said there's a very short weather window between wind, and we could just sneak out of here and blast across and get over there in 2 days and duck in safely, but we'd have to leave right now. And I said, okay, let's do it. Well, it wasn't a good move, as you can imagine, and we ended up getting into the Gulf Stream current against us, and some big winds and some big seas. and squalls, rain squalls. Anyway, just really bad all-round weather. And then the sail ripped out, and we had trouble with the prop, and it was just going from bad to worse. And I said, "Oh my God, Daragh, what are we going to do now?" And he said, "I don't know." And then I really started saying my Hail Marys. But he did know. We actually just turned around and went right back where we were coming from. And of course, as soon as you turn around and get out of the wind, and you're now downwind sailing fast all the way back, and we got into the Panama Canal in Cologne at 2 o'clock in the morning with all the big freighters going by on either side, and rain squalls happening, and it was quite the scene. But we were soaked to the skin, and when we dropped anchor in the flats outside of what was the name of the
Panama Flats in Cologne.
Yeah, outside of the marina there. It was just with an incredible sense of relief. And, we spent 2 weeks putting our sails back together, putting ourselves back together, and we carried on and never looked back.
Well, some of the lessons that I've learned along the way are that the boat is never really in a state of being fully prepared. So if you're thinking of going offshore, try and achieve 90 or 95% ready, because it's sort of like the boat condition to be needing something repaired at all times. So don't stall going away. So if you're having work done on the boat, if you can do it yourself, that's ideal. There's lots of online resources, and there are also some great courses in the Bluewater cruising that can help you. But if you are having trades on board, try and find one that will allow you work alongside them, and that way you can learn. Even if it delays the job a little bit, it's well worthwhile, so you can learn what your equipment is all about. Because if it does go wrong, and it's more like when it goes wrong, and you're distant from any other resources, it's nice to have an idea of how it goes together. So that would be an important lesson. I think communications, have a dependable communication system. We had a single sideband radio. We also had an Iridium DeLorme inReach, and that allowed us to use the satellites to send and receive texts. If I was setting out today, rather than 10 years ago, I would have, in addition, an Iridium Go. I think that's a very valuable communication tool. But get these tools on board and practice with them.
I guess wherever we go when we travel, I think it's very important to be open-minded and to put your best face forward to whoever you meet, and be positive. Put a smile on your face and go out confident. And whether you're traveling in Central America or Europe or wherever, make the best of the situation you're in. And you'll find that you need people's help along the way. Try and learn some of the language wherever you are. Even the smallest bit of vocabulary can help a lot, because it shows that you are appreciating the people that you're dealing with, and it allows you to build some kind of a relationship with them that will pay off along the way. And not only that, people will help you everywhere you go. We found that the people were kind-hearted, generous, and wanted to help us out. But also, it's a lot more fun when you interact with the locals and get invited home to their place for a home-cooked meal and see how the other half lives. You learn so much about others and about yourself. So I would always recommend to be open-minded and as forthcoming as you possibly can when you're out there in the world meeting people, and just take a big bite out of life and go for it.
Well, when it comes to budgeting, we thought about that, And one thing that we did is we decided to rent our home out on a year-to-year basis when we left. And I would strongly recommend that approach. Even though, yes, it is a hassle dealing with renters and so on, but it's doable. And it's a very good protection. It's a hedge against the house prices going crazy high while you're away. One thing you can be sure is your boat is depreciating and the real estate where we live in Victoria is appreciating. So that was one thing. So with that assistance from the rental income, generally I would say that the costs were probably a bit more manageable than I expected. And if I was to throw a number on it, on average, between 2011 and 2016, I suppose about $4,000 a month. I know some people who have done it for half that, but we like to spell ourselves off with some marina time as well as anchorages and also some hotels periodically. It's just nice to get away from the boat and go to a nice hotel with nice running hot and cold water showers and a little bit of luxury. And I strongly encourage doing that.
It's important to know your role on the boat and where you fit into the scene. Also, you know, we always try, and nobody has to do anything they don't want to do, which sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. But we're traditional, kind of blue-pink, and I'm chief cook and bottle washer. Daragh handles a lot of the electronics and navigation on the boat, but I have taken all the training, and I can operate most things on the boat. But he is definitely the skipper, and that suits me just fine. You know, I just find we had no trouble getting along in a small space. I think I'm used to living in a small house. You have to go out of your way not to get on each other's case about, don't sweat the small things. That would be key to it all. And enjoy where you're at, and go exploring and get off the boat. Go traveling and go hiking and go exploring and do some unusual things that you wouldn't do. You know, like zip lining through Costa Rica. You know, yeah. I don't know. Go easy on each other, wouldn't you say?
I think so, and I would also say when it comes to on board, when you're picking your boat, there's a concept called sulking room. Now, that's not actually a room. It's just space where if you want to go away and read a book, or you don't want to continue proving you're right about something. You know, having a place you can retreat to is nice. And this boat works very well because it's center cockpit, it's got an aft cabin, a forward cabin. So if you want something quiet away from the madding world, there's a place to go. I would say when it comes to crew, we never had more than a single extra person on. And then when I was doing passages, I would typically have 2 extra sailors on board. I found a 3-way division of chores and shifts and watches worked very well.
We did a 3 hours on, 3 hours off. In the daytime, we're both on duty.
Yeah.
But at night, as soon as dusk happens, we went into our 3 hours on, 3 hours off right through the night if we were doing passages. And everybody's different, but we found that was an ideal amount of time, because you do get sleepy and, you know, you're kind of drifting off in the middle of the night staring at the stars, and it keeps you on your toes, and you still get quite a decent amount of sleep.
So we even when there were 3 guys on board, which was typical, we would have, you know, a 3-hour on, 3 off. Others have different ideas on that, and that also works as well. But I think other aspects of making it work I was surprised when Kate couldn't, had to go back for that in year 3 to go back to school. I was surprised at how readily people were willing to come forward and fly out to wherever we were at, do a long passage, maybe an ocean passage, and then fly back home again. And it's an amazing experience, and all, as far as I'm aware, thoroughly enjoyed it. As far as life on board, on the long passages, life settles into a routine. No surprise that sleeping is a highlight of the day, and the meals are a highlight.
Sleeping.
And we rotated that duty, and with quite pleasant results. Another important highlight of the day was happy hour or captain's hour, and
Hora Feliz.
we Hora Feliz, and we always would look forward to that. Now on passage, we would limit ourselves to a single glass of wine, a single beer, and the only other alcohol would be a celebratory tot when some major milestone, like passing a meridian or a time zone. Interesting thing though, the crew becomes very adept at coming up with new milestone events, and the skipper has to push back on that.
Yeah.
And as far as on board with Kate and myself, I do get all the responsibilities of being the skipper, and that works very well as long as I remember that Kate is the admiral. And I'd advise anybody on an offshore trip to consider doing likewise. This is a Moody 376. It's a center cockpit sloop, and with the addition of a Solent stay, which is a good addition for shortening sail. And it had at the time a Perkins diesel engine. Since then I've upgraded it to a Beta 38 diesel. And I had to do a number of improvements that were needed to get it ready for the offshore trip. So if you'd like to follow me, I'll take you for a little tour of the outside hardware in the boat. Well, hello again. And here we are, and I want to show you some of the interesting things that we've done on the boat to make it ready for going offshore. Now, a very important feature on any boat is the anchor, and that was one of the first upgrades. You'll notice that we have a Rockna 20 kilogram, about a 44 pound, and that's 10 pounds more than the anchor the boat came with. And one improvement was going from a manual windlass to this lovely Bluewater, I think it's a P1000 electric windlass, and this, along with the 175 feet of 5/16 chain and 100 feet of road, I find is quite adequate for all the places that we went. One of the things that you'll learn that the ability to shorten sail it becomes very important. And one of the disadvantages of a sloop is that when you furl your head sail away and you need to shorten some more, there's nothing left. So one solution is fitting your boat with a Solent stay. And that's this stay here. It goes right to the masthead. And the importance of that is it doesn't require any running backs if you have a Solent stay going right to the masthead. So I take this away, this is its storage position, and I hook it to a strong point behind the mast. It's also proved useful, gave me the ability to fly a second sail alongside my Genoa. And for going downwind, a pair of head sails is a great combination. Now, one thing you'll find yourself doing eventually is planning a lot of your trips and weather windows so that you're sailing downwind. Sailing downwind is what gentlemen do, they say. However, one of the downsides of downwind is the risk of an accidental jibe. So you must have a preventer deployed, which we did for the first few years. But halfway through the trip, I discovered boom brakes. This is a boom brake by Walder, and they're made in, this one is made in France. There are other ones available, and this is a superior system as far as I'm concerned. because it doesn't try and stop the boom, it breaks it, and it allows it to yield gently to the overwhelming force of a jibe rather than trying to stop it dead. You'll notice I've got a second set of blocks, and that is for me to use in the event I have a fully furled head sail and now I deploy my sol and stay. I need a new set of sheets for the storm jib because this one is busy and furled. So that's why we have a second pair of blocks. So for working around the mast, you'll notice that we have granny bars because all my control lines are at the mast. Bit of a disadvantage in some ways, but it keeps the cockpit clear of the clutter of extra lines. But if you're working at the mast, the granny bars provide some security to you while you're reefing or other jobs. You'll also notice here on the mast that I have the whisker pole mounted on the face of the mast, and that keeps it nicely out of the way. You'll also notice that I now have the radome of the radar mounted on the mast. It's the new quantum style, and it connects to the chart plotter system by way of Wi-Fi, and avoiding the need to try and run a fat radar cable down through the mast. Now we'll talk about the Dodger and the Bimini. So we started a trip with just a Dodger, thinking that with a center cockpit there'd be no practical way to accomplish a full enclosure, but with a bit of effort we have succeeded in doing that. This Dodger comes with a complete set of covers, and I would highly recommend that. There are times where it is so hot or so torrential raining that you want to have all the protection that you can get. The Bimini back here is what we would use most of the time. However, if we're sailing or maybe more adventurous, we can fold it right back. We also have a transition piece that joins the two together, and we can fully enclose it all the way around. We didn't have that when we started, but by the time we left the Rio Dulce, we realized this is something that we really needed and now have it fully enclosed. For steering, we have the boat steering system, of course, but we fitted a hydrovane. Hydrovane has been very valuable for the offshore passages part of our trip. We don't typically bother to use it coastal unless we're testing it or trying it out. The nice thing with a hydrovane is that it is a completely independent rudder, and rudder failure on a boat is a very serious event, and having a completely independent redundant rudder, as well as all of the advantages of being an excellent wind vane steering system, makes the hydrovane a good choice for us. Okay, I'll start with the anchor. A couple of things here at the stern. You'll notice that we have a second anchor, and this is ready to deploy as a kedge or in the event I should lose my main anchor. This style of anchor works better in grass or that type of a situation. However, it's very seldom I need to use that. The Rockna has been an excellent anchor. While we're here, I'd like to show you our latest acquisition, which is a Spirit e-propulsion electric outboard. We did most of our trip with an 8 horsepower Yamaha with our dinghy that's behind us, but I've now changed to electric, and this Spirit 1.0 is equivalent to a 3 horsepower gas motor, and now that I've gone electric I don't need to carry gasoline on board the boat anymore. And you can see I have an abundance of solar power, 380 watts, and it has no trouble providing all the power I need to keep the electric outboard satisfied. So you'll notice I'm towing an 8-foot dinghy. It's by AB. It's made of Hypalon, and it's protected with chaps. I had these made in, again, the Rio Dulce, and they have protected from the sun, and I have to say, touch wood, we've never had a puncture yet. And that's it's a 2009, so in 11 years. So for navigation, we've basically got 3 systems here. My favorite of all has become the Navionics on my iPad, mounted right at the helm, so I can see and quickly change plans. I also have the Raymarine ES78, which is a combination radar display as well. And downstairs you'll see at the nav station I also have a laptop with OpenCPN. So we've got 3 independent navigation systems. Other features you'll find around here are the autopilot control, which is very valuable and gets a lot of work, and it's a real, I highly recommend the best autopilot that you can get. By the way, I got a T2. It's good for a boat almost twice as big as this, and having an overpowerful autopilot I highly recommend. It's never let us down. The only other thing I want to show you while I'm here is my my winch right electric winch, and this little guy gives me the power to wind in the big Genoa when I'm single-handing. And now I'd like to show you my command mic. This is an extension of the boat's VHF radio, and it's very useful to have this right at the helm so that you have good communications when you're conning your way in and out of harbours, particularly if you're single-handing. So finding a place to store everything is always difficult on the boat. So the centre cockpit, this Moody, has a large lazarette, and it's right here underneath the seat, and you've got this big chamber that I can just go all the way down into and store away all my lines, extra lines. And I also, you'll find I installed a Webasto hydronic heating system and found a home for it in the lazarette. So this is a very useful thing to have. Okay, so here we are at the nav station, and although I can do most of my navigation right at the helm with the iPad, I do my serious route planning here using OpenCPN. And it's a rule on Chantey V. We always have a route mapped right from the beginning, right into the destination harbour the whole way. As well as the laptop, we have our VHF radio here. We've got an entertainment radio here. We also have Sirius XM. Sirius XM satellite radio is a good friend when you're offshore. It'll reach almost 200 miles offshore, and it'll take you most of the way down through Mexico. Other features here are my single sideband radio, and this allows us to make long distance HF communications, as well as in conjunction with the Pactor modem that I have in the aft cabin, allows us to do emails and download GRIB files. This small device here, which costs about $60 from Australia, is called a Yacker, and it allows me to transmit our AIS information from here up to the iPad, or indeed to any iPhone device that's on the boat. One thing on a boat when you're living on it permanently is managing electrical power in and out. And what makes it very tolerable for us is having this HART interface, Link 2000. It connects up to the Freedom 1000 inverter charger, and on these various buttons I can measure the current rate of consumption, and I can also press here and I can see what the accumulated deficit is and how much more I can go. We have 600 amp hours of house bank, and but of course with the 50-80 rule, effectively there's about 150 usable amp hours.
So this is our galley. It's very compact, but it suits me just fine, being that I'm the chief cook and bottle washer on Chantey V. And as you can see, we've got a gimbal stove here, which rocks back and forth when you're at sea and trying to cook. It's a propane stove, and it's also got a nice little oven. So I pretty much do the same kind of cooking that I could do at home. You can have a hot meal every night, And we often barbecue outdoors, especially in the tropics. You want to get the heat out of your cabin, and that takes up the slack somewhat and makes sharing the duties on board with the cooking a little easier. We've got lots of good storage, and then we've got a dry storage box here for all kinds of dry things. We've got a double sink, which is nice. This one is the saltwater faucet, and then we also have a pump faucet on this side, manual, and then of course the hot and cold water taps there. On this side we've got a refrigeration, and it's a top-down fridge. Not ideal under all circumstances, but we've managed to make little buckets, which we have different baskets of food in, and we have all of our fruits, vegetables. Well, the fruits can also go outside in baskets like this, or hanging them in little nets. Those work for us very well. And we pretty much get everything we need stored in here. There's a small freezer. I would definitely recommend repackaging all your food when you start provisioning for a long trip. You don't necessarily have to, pack everything you're ever going to eat along the way. There's restaurants and grocery stores almost everywhere you go. We have had a couple instances where there wasn't, but then you've got canned food and things packed away. But repackaging, or actually taking off all the packaging and then repackaging them in little plastic baggies and stacking your meats and fish in smaller amounts, you can get maybe 2 weeks worth of food in your freezer that way. And we've never had any trouble at all. It's really a breeze to do provisioning if you're sound about it, and don't get too carried away. Unless you're doing, of course, an ocean crossing, then you must have everything packed with you, of course. But that's about it for the galley.
When we got rid of the water maker after 4 years, it required a bit more discipline in managing the water. And to that end, we got a water book. And before the long passage, we practiced to see how much water we actually needed. We had 60-gallon tanks. We got 2 5-gallon jerry cans for water, as well as developing a Bimini water catching system. So that worked quite well. We realized then that you need about 2 liters per person per day for the longer passages, and that got marked down in the water book as we went along. And in fact, I found that people weren't drinking enough water. It also told me that, and we would encourage them to drink more water. Another thing for the long passages, I turned off the electric water pump, and all water had to be done using the foot pump. And all the containers were half a litre to make sure that it was easy to check the amount being consumed.
Well, there's a lot of pros and cons about taking your pet on a long distance cruise, for sure. But we would have to say that the pros far outweigh the cons. First of all, you've got a wonderful companion along the way, someone else to talk to that doesn't talk back. And, they just add so much to your world if they're able to, manage the boat along the way. And we've had lots of fun with her, meeting people in different countries, and the children all come running when they see a little dog. So that's been really nice. But at first it can be a bit overwhelming, because you can go online and see every country you go to has different regulations about dogs and cats. And there seem to be a lot of things that you have to do, but really it just comes down to having a proper health certificate from your vet and a rabies shot, and generally you're good to go. We rarely had anybody come aboard. Customs guys rarely came and asked anything about the dog whatsoever. And certainly, in Panama and places where they say the animal needs to be quarantined for 2 weeks, nobody ever seemed to bother with any of that. So I think it's definitely worth it if you're an animal lover to plan on bringing your pet along. Even your pussycat. We met many pussycats that did very well on boats along the way too.